In academia, being yourself can feel like the biggest risk you ever take. Yet, the greatest rewards actually come from being yourself. In today's episode, The Cost of Entry, we discuss the pros and cons of why it is important to be yourself. Hi everyone, this is the Melanated PhD and I'm your host, Diamond, or soon to be Dr. Dime, and I'm so glad that you're here with us. Last week, we spoke with Dr. Dakota Tyler, also known as Dr. Star Kid, and he really gave us so much insight into changing your orbit. And changing your orbit in this sense was really a play on his role as an astrophysicist, but your orbit is really just stepping out of your comfort zone or launching yourself into an environment that you may not be accustomed to. And that conversation had so much depth to it that as I was reflecting, I realized that I've had many seasons in my life where I've transitioned or changed my orbit. And specifically when I was younger, before I wanted to be a scientist, before I wanted to be an engineer, before I wanted to do cancer research, I remember wanting to be a journalist. Like I wanted to be the next Katie Couric, right? And it's just so full circle how God is so intentional about everything working together. Because now with this podcast, I'm able to fulfill that dream in a sense. And so this is really why an organization that I started with my friends, the Black Doctors Creative, is so important. And I did want to do a little shout out to the BDC because we had our first mixer event pre-launch last week as well. And we're about to have our official launch, grand launch this upcoming Friday. But the purpose of the BDC, the Black Doctors Creative, is really to do what I just described, making sure that JDs, PhDs, MDs, any type of terminal degree owner, especially in the Black community, feel supported in all of the avenues of their interests, whether that be related to STEM or academia, but also their creative aspects and, their creative expression, whether that be music, whether that be journalism, whether that be art. And we really want this to be a space where we can network together, we can connect with one another, but also create with one another as we thrive together. And so I'm going to insert some clips, or Bernard, please insert some clips from our mixer event, but this is really the inspiration behind this episode. So today's episode is really inspired by the mission of the Black Doctors Creative, because as I was reflecting, I realized that a lot of times in academia will teach you to think independently, but it does not always support you being independent. And this is especially true as a Black academician, as a Black female academician, because there have been so many times throughout my program where I have been othered, right? Not just because I'm a Black woman, which is definitely the case in some instances, but because I consider myself well-rounded. Like I love science, I am a nerd, I'm a proud nerd even, but I have so many other interests. And for my lab specifically, they know they can always count on me for creative directing the photo opt. And whenever we have symposiums or presentations, like I always want to make sure that our slide presentations are really engaging and the aesthetic is there. And the music for our events is always like fitting and things like that. So much so that my lab mate one time, she gave me a journal. And the front of the journal, I wish I brought it, but maybe I can insert a picture here. On one side, it says other PhD students, and it's like a regular horse. And then The other side is you, and it's like a unicorn. And she said that, Diamond, when I saw this journal, like I felt like that was you to the T, because you are not like most PhD students. I mean, you like to go to show tapings. You're at the Jennifer Hudson show one week. You're at the BET Awards one week. You're at the NAACP Awards another week. You love to play Just Dance. You love to like hike. Like there's so many things outside of my role as a researcher that make me who I am. And I think that is really important for everyone to internalize, making sure that you have an identity outside of your PhD. In fact, I think it's important to your mental health to make sure that you're violently aware of the fact that the PhD is going to be a very great feat that you accomplish, but I would even go as far as to say that's not the most amazing thing you will accomplish, right? Like the PhD is not who you are. It's something that you do. It's something that you're going to earn. And so this whole idea that academia doesn't always support independence while it may support independent thinking is really important, because there are pros and cons to both, right? There's pros to really conforming to the general mainstream of what it means to be a researcher. And there are also some cons to that. And so, first and foremost, I believe that this may sound really harsh. Sometimes it is the price of success, right? So I posted on Melanated PhD. Also, shameless plug, if you're not following Melanated PhD on Instagram, please do. It's MELANATED.PhD on Instagram. But I had posted a reel about a year ago, and it reads, "Maturing in academia is realizing conformity isn't just peer pressure, it's the price of success in academia. Staying true to yourself, that's the real rebellion." And so when I say that conformity isn't just peer pressure, it's sometimes the price of success in academia. I mean that quite literally. Academia has so many implicit norms about behaviors, appearance, communication, and the way that you carry yourself. And I know for myself, I've received comments from other researchers or higher ups in a presentation setting where like, you need to speak more academic, right? Or you need to speak more scientific. Now, as someone who is a Black woman, that can be really racist, right? Because I automatically come with African American vernacular because of my background as a Black woman. And so when we're saying things like that or getting comments like that, it's hard to separate those comments from tangible opportunities, right? So when you want to talk about what Dakota said in his episode, he was saying that he would apply for certain roles as like a host of a science show. And he's not saying that it was because it was, a race thing, but he noticed that they will always go with the white person or the white option. And so those type of things can be considered to some as success in academia. Another thing is there's always biases and discrimination, right? So one of the pillars of Melanated PhD is to bridge this gap between Black youth and higher level academia. It was like a 200-year gap between when the first university in America was founded, Harvard University, and when the first HBCU was founded. So as you can imagine, there's so many more barriers when it comes to the Black diaspora and white people when it comes to opportunities, and how white people have been given a 200-year head start to climb this ladder and be the higher up CEOs and of these companies that you would eventually apply for. So automatically there is a certain unspoken, well, sometimes it is spoken, pressure to want to conform so that you can be aligned with the opportunities that you feel, really suit your interests in your career and financial goals. Another thing can be that oversharing can really complicate your relationships in a professional and academic setting. I know that for myself, a lot of people questioned whether I was focused because I have a social media presence, or I like to enjoy things outside of the lab. And I, not to say there's any bitterness there, but I did feel a need to kind of make sure that it's not just a separation of work-life balance in terms of when I'm working, but also the community that I associate with my work, and also the community that I associate outside of work. Because when you do intertwine those things, it really is hard to have boundaries that are complementary to your mental health overall. And so my question to you would be, how do you make sure that you are strategically being yourself in an environment where it's not forfeiting your idea of success? But on the other hand, and because I'm speaking of this as like a section related to the cons of being yourself, I think it really goes down to, what do you define as success, right? Because there's always a risk with anything that you do. But I believe that being yourself largely outweighs the risk of forfeiting or missing out on any opportunity, because I believe that what's meant for you will never miss you. So this leads me into what I believe are the pros of staying true to yourself, especially in an academic context. So pros to being yourself, or embracing your independence as an academician, first and foremost would be improved well-being, right? There's nothing more exhausting than being a victim of imposter syndrome, because imposter syndrome is literally rooted in overworking because you're trying to be something that you're not, right? And so I think one of the ways that I have learned over the course of my PhD that has been literally so essential to my mental health is to redefine my ideas of success. My idea of success is no longer the approval of those around me. Even, my principal investigators or my dissertation committee, my idea of success now is staying true to myself, right? Like I said in the reel, that's the real rebellion, to stay true to yourself in the midst of all of these pressures to conform. I think that's the hardest thing you can do. And so if you are able to do that, you are successful. And I think that it also goes back to the point about really being able to see yourself outside of the context of what you do, right? We are valuable to this world, not because of what we offer or how impressive our resume is. We're valuable to this world because before we were formed in our mother's womb, God knew us, He chose us, He selected us. And I think that that is really a game changer. Another really strong pro for staying true to yourself in an academic sense is creative expression is rejuvenating. It's life-giving. Being able to express yourself and giving yourself the opportunity to feel understood is, I don't know, for me, it's been refreshing in the sense that I am able to attract other people who are aligned with my vision, with my interests. And I don't believe that we were meant to do life alone. And so creativity is one of those avenues where you can welcome diverse perspectives, and your diverse perspectives or expression is also welcome. And so that's also why the Black Doctors Creative has been really important, because it's not just about finding like-minded community that are also getting a PhD, a MD, or another terminal degree. It's also about finding people who are like-minded in the way that they understand that you don't just operate from a left brain or right brain. You are not an optimized individual until you are optimizing your full brain, which includes the left side, your logical, problem-solving side, and the right side, which is your creative expression and your ability to empathize or feel emotion. And so I think that's also really important. And then lastly, representation. When people see that you are giving yourself the opportunity to be your full self, it empowers others to be able to do the same. And that's really what the goal of Melanated PhD has been, even before it was a podcast. The two goals were to bridge the gap between Black youth and higher level academia, and to debunk a lot of the lies that people have heard about earning a STEM PhD. And a lot of those lies are rooted in, you have to be this way, you have to look this way, you have to be serious, right? And so I think that my persona in general really breaks that glass ceiling, because I came into my PhD immediately very aware of the fact that I don't have anybody who looks like me around me. I don't have anybody who has outside extracurricular interests like me, but that doesn't mean that I'm not meant to be here, right? Like, that representation is important, because, you know, they always say, like, you can't be who you haven't seen. But sometimes when you don't see what you want to be, you have to be that first person for the next generation. And so I think that representation and inclusion is important, because visible identities do empower those around us, and not just the next generation. You can inspire your parents' generation. You can inspire your peers around you. And I think that that's really important. And I really hope that that is a major takeaway of the Melanated PhD. So in conclusion, I really hope that the main takeaway of this discussion is that authenticity, one, exists on a spectrum. And I think it's important to be aware of what sets you apart, but also do not be confined by that, right? Because we're constantly evolving. I think that it can become a pressure point to sometimes be constrained by the identities that you place on yourself. But I think what Black Doctors Creative and what our next guest will really talk to us about is understanding that it's okay if your identities change over time. Like, it's okay if before starting my PhD journey, I considered myself a mathematician, and now I consider myself an engineer, or now I consider myself as both. And in 5th grade, when I wanted to be Katie Couric, I consider myself a journalist. Like, we can be all things at once, right? Like, who is telling us that we have to put ourselves in these boxes? And so I really hope that moving forward, this is like our main defense against imposter syndrome and depression and anxiety and all of these things that a lot of graduate students, including myself, can attest to the experience being associated with. This is our weapon of warfare against that, because when you are secure in who you are, the grades, the evaluations, the exams, the comments, and the feedback, it's harder to shake when you're on a steady, anchored in a foundation of who you are outside of the accomplishments. And so one of the things that I would tell myself if I could go back in time to me coming into my PhD program is this. You will never fit in sometimes, because one, God has called you to stand out, but to whoever is listening, you have been set apart with intention, with provision, and with purpose, right? So what makes you different, what makes you independent, what makes you an outlier is your literal superpower. And so lean into that, especially in academia, but also in life. I think that if more people resisted the urge to conform to societal pressures and societal norms, I feel like we would progress, advance as a society as a whole, because nobody is reinventing the wheel, right? Like, we're all on our own paths, and like the left and right brain conversation, we are all optimizing the functionality of our strengths. And we're really dampening the weaknesses that we may, identify by strengthening one another. So thank you so much for listening. Feel free to like, and make sure you're subscribing on Spotify. Make sure you're subscribing on Apple Podcasts, and also subscribe on YouTube so that we can get our subscribers up, and then we can get monetized and all of those things. And also make sure, once again, you're following Melanated PhD on Instagram, MELANATED.PhD. And tune in next week. Thank you.